What is your best one time my dad story?
Story 1.
One time my dad took my brother's walkie-talkie and had us and about 10 kids in the neighborhood convinced that we had picked up a signal from a plane that was crashing towards the earth. We were running up and down the streets for an hour with our eyes on the sky, listening as the pilot tried to reach someone for help. Dad's windows were open, so we eventually caught on to the heinous laughter echoing between the houses after every mayday.
Story 2.
One time my dad waited till my 3 siblings and I had gone to bed on Christmas Eve. Then he shouted, "I don't care who you are, fat man, get that sled off my roof." We were all up and telling Dad not to yell at Santa.
Story 3.
One time when I was about 10, my dad called me to his room. He and my mom were there, completely naked, standing around and laying their clothes down, ready to get dressed. They acted like the situation was completely normal and asked me about some random thing. I eventually blocked this memory out and thought it to be a dream, but then 10 years later, they told me that this was their way of showing me what a body looked like because I was getting close to that age. Dude, what the fuck? I can't argue with their logic, but I question their methods.
Story 4.
This was a few years back, but my dad really got into my pot brownies. Only way I know this is because I woke up in the middle of the night to him putting baby socks on my dog. His only statement was, "Dogs shouldn't have cold feet."
Story 5.
One time my older brother and I were helping my dad cut down some trees in the backyard and saw the chainsaw kind of stuck, and my dad yanked it out a little too hard and hit my brother's leg. We all froze and looked at his jeans, which had 4 or so perfectly spaced holes, but no blood. He had managed to hit my brother's pants, but did not get in far enough to hit flesh. The next words out of his mouth were pretty obvious. "Don't tell your mother." And we still haven't 20 plus years later. One time my dad took me to my college orientation back in '98. I grew up in an urban setting and wanted to mix it up, so I decided on an undergrad school in a very rural area. Read, not a lot of diversity. My dad is the best and always wants to goof around. We had this Jeep growing up that we called Little Blackie because it was little and black. A running joke was that anytime any of us in the family saw a similar looking Jeep, one of us would yell, "Hey, look, it's Little Blackie." Bet you see where this is going. We're walking around campus, and sure enough, there was a Jeep parked within sight. My dad starts yelling, "Hey, look, Little Blackie, Little Blackie." Of course, the only African-American kid on campus was walking right in front of us. My dad was oblivious and kept right on yelling. The poor kid looked at me in disgust, and I was so very mortified. I wanted to disappear. I ended up becoming really good friends with him later in my freshman year, and after I explained the whole story, he laughed super hard. Thank goodness. I still cringe thinking about it, though.
Story 6.
One time my dad saw I was in a really low mood, so he walked into my room, grabbed my trash, Hatsune Miku wig, and my swim goggles, put them on, and followed me around for a solid 10 minutes, completely nonchalant to make me laugh. Imagine, if you will, a large, imposing black man wearing a pigtailed wig and goggles so old they're turning brown, casually making himself a sandwich.
Story 7.
One time my dad came home after I had a party at the house. There were girls dancing together on the pool table, and one of them had Cheeto dust on their fingers. I tried to clean it, but couldn't get it all off before they got home. He calls me downstairs and asks about the marks on the table. I couldn't think of a lie, so I just told him the truth. He stares at me for a couple of seconds, then says, "Nice."
Story 8.
One day, my dad almost slit my throat because he thought I was a burglar. I had snuck downstairs for some reason. I was in the kitchen and heard him coming in, so I hid behind the kitchen counter. Heard my dad opening drawers and things. Next thing I know, he had leaned over the counter and grabbed my head, had a kitchen knife to my throat. A split second later, he realized it was me and dropped me. Then I got yelled at because he had heard me breathing, thought I was a home intruder, and almost got in a world of pain. He was shaking from adrenaline. As a dad now myself, I can imagine the state of mind he was in.
Story 9.
One time my dad scared the piss out of a guy that wouldn't take no for an answer. I got pretty much peer pressured onto going on a double date with a guy I hated, and I had told him I hated him. We both worked at the local fast food joint. I was fresh out of high school and naive and felt like I had to be nice. He asked me out in a way that put me on the spot, too. On his day off in the middle of my shift, he showed up dressed like he was going to a wedding and brought me a bunch of flowers and asked me in the middle of a lunch rush, mortifying me, and everyone started chanting, "Say yes." I agreed and ran out of my shift crying and feeling like I couldn't back out. It was painfully obvious during and after the date that I was not interested. He kept calling me, texting me, leaving me threatening and weird voicemails. He even drove to my house a few times. My parents, noticing my change in mood, asked me what was up, and I told them and played them the voicemails. My dad asked me when we next had the same shift, and I told him. My dad came to the restaurant after his factory shift. My dad is a big dude and looks scary, especially covered in grease and wearing a uniform. My dad busts into the restaurant, gives me a hug, asks me, "Where's the son of a bitch?" Everyone is frozen in place and slack-jawed. Anyone that knew my dad knew him as a goofy kind guy, so they were just in awe of this whirlwind that had bust in the door. I pointed to the kitchen, and this dopey motherfucker looks like he is going to piss his pants. My dad points right at him and says, "Leave my daughter the fuck alone, or I will go back to jail." He tells me he loves me, and mom is cooking dinner. Waves to some of my friends he knows and walks out the door like nothing ever happens. The guy went on break and never came back, and never bothered me again.
Story 10.
One time, my dad was sitting on the couch in our living room. My mom brought out a bag of sugar and asked him to open it. He opened it like it was a bag of Doritos, and I mean, it was everywhere. He was only wearing his shorts, so there was sugar in just about every square inch of his visible hair, as well as over our couch and carpet. Took him 4 showers in a row to get it all off.
Story 11.
One time, my dad ripped a humongous fart and killed all the power in the neighborhood. Literally dark. Spoiler, we later found out that someone had hit a pole further up the line at that exact moment. It made perfect sense to us kids. Dad's an electrician. He has deadly farts. Dark. Now I use this as an example that correlation is not causation.
Story 12.
One time, my dad literally took candy from a baby. A 2-year-old held up a lollipop, and my dad assumed the kid was giving it to him. After taking it and walking away, he realized the toddler probably just wanted to show it to him.
Story 13.
According to my grandmother, my dad, on his first day of school back in the 60s, came home all smiles and laughter. The next day, when my grandmother awoke him for his second day of school, he matter-of-factly replied, "No, I've already been to school." He really thought that school was something like the dentist or inoculations, where you only have to go the once, and that's it. LOL.